Hey guys. Tonight we're drifting back to the heart of the 18th century, to a time of powdered wigs, flickering candlelight, and empires ripe for the taking. We're diving into the remarkable story of a young princess, born into relative obscurity, who would claw her way to the pinnacle of power, becoming one of history's most formidable rulers. You find yourself in a chilly, stone-walled room, the damp air of the Baltic coast seeping in. It's Stettin, Pomerania, a provincial town that's hardly the glittering epicenter of European society. The year is 1729, and you are Sophie Friederike Augusta von Anhalt-Zerbst, a name rather more grand than your immediate prospects. The wind whispers outside, carrying the scent of pine and the distant, mournful cry of a seabird, a far cry from the opulent courts you might read about in smuggled French novels. Most young women in your position, with your lineage, are destined for a quiet life, a sensible marriage to a neighboring princeling, perhaps a footnote in a dusty genealogical chart. Your family, while noble, commands a territory that's more of a respectable postage stamp than a kingdom. Honestly, given the brutal political games of the era. Plagues, the wars, the sheer, unadulterated treachery that passes for diplomacy. You probably won't survive this if we're placing bets purely on statistics and your starting point. The chances of you becoming anything more than a Duchess of Dillenburg or Countess of Katzenelnbogen are, shall we say, astronomically slim. But then again, you've always had a spark, haven't you? A flicker of something more than just dutiful obedience. So, before you get comfortable in your rather austere little castle bedroom, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It truly helps the channel find other curious minds like yours, looking for a gentle escape into the past. And as always, I'd love to see where you're joining from tonight. Go ahead and post your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see our little community of history sleep enthusiasts stretching across the globe, from moonlit deserts to rainy cityscapes. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The room you're in isn't grand. Far from it. The tapestries are a little faded. The fire in the grate struggles to push back the damp chill that seems to be a permanent resident of Stettin Castle. Your father, Christian August, Prince of Anhalt-Zerbst, is a sober, rather stern military man. A Prussian field marshal. He's dutiful, disciplined, and perhaps a little disappointed that you weren't a boy. Your mother, Johanna Elizabeth of Holstein-Gottorp, is another story altogether. She's charming, ambitious, well-connected. Her brother is slated to become King of Sweden, and she has cousins scattered through the royal houses of Europe. But she's also somewhat flighty, easily bored, and her affections for you can feel conditional, contingent on how well you perform, how well you might advance her own social standing. It's a bit like living with a peacock who occasionally remembers you exist, usually when there's an audience. You spend your days in lessons. French, of course, the lingua franca of polite society and whispered courtly secrets. Lutheran catechism, naturally, for the good of your soul and public propriety. A smattering of history and geography, enough to know where Prussia is and why it matters. Your tutors find you intelligent, perhaps a little too questioning for a girl. You learn to curtsy, to manage a polite smile even when your stays are digging into your ribs, and to listen intently while appearing entirely unassuming. These are the survival skills of a minor German princess. The highlight of your social calendar might be a visit from a distant relative, bringing with them the faint, intoxicating scent of a world far removed from your own sleepy corner of Pomerania. The excitement in Zerbst, the small town your family actually rules, is probably when the town crier gets a new bell. Thrilling stuff, really. It's a mainstream historical fact that Sophie was born in Stettin, Pomerania, now Szczecin, Poland, which at the time of her birth was under Prussian administration, though her father was the governor. This detail anchors your early years to a specific, tangible place, one caught between Germanic and Slavic influences, a frontier town of sorts. You can almost smell the sea salt and hear the creak of timbered houses as you walk through its imaginary streets. The evenings are long. Lamplight flickers, casting dancing shadows on the wall. Perhaps you're poring over a book, something a little more daring than your tutors recommend. A French romance, a philosophical treatise smuggled in by a sympathetic governess. You learn about queens who ruled in their own right, about women who shaped destinies. Do these stories plant a seed? Or is it simply an escape from the quiet, predictable rhythm of your life? Your father is often away on military duties, and your mother is frequently preoccupied with her own social ambitions, writing letters, planning visits, trying to weave her way into more influential circles. You are often left to your own devices, a quiet observer in a household that feels more like a waiting room than a home. You understand, even at a young age, that your marriage will be a transaction. Your value lies in your lineage, your health, your potential to forge an alliance or secure a connection for your family. It's a cold, pragmatic truth in this era of dynastic politics. Love is a luxury seldom afforded to those in your station, at least not in a first marriage. The idea of marrying for passion is something out of those scandalous novels, not for a princess of Anhalt-Zerbst. You'll be lucky if your future husband is kind, or at least not openly cruel. Maybe he won't snore like a boar, or smell too strongly of stale beer and wet dogs. Small mercies, you suppose. The Holy Roman Empire, of which your tiny principality is a part, is a sprawling, complex tapestry of states, electorates, and free cities. It's a patchwork quilt of ambitions and rivalries, all nominally under the distant authority of the emperor in Vienna. Power is fragmented, constantly shifting. Your father's principality, Anhalt-Zerbst, is one of the smaller patches on that quilt. It's a mouthful of a name for a territory that, in modern terms, you could probably cross by car in under an hour. Grand titles for not-so-grand domains were rather fashionable back then. Historians and biographers often engage in discussions about the early influences that shaped Catherine's formidable character. Indeed, academic circles remain divided about whether her relatively austere upbringing and her mother's inconsistent affection forged her resilience or simply masked a deeper insecurity. Was it the neglect that made you self-reliant, or did it instill a hunger for approval that would later manifest on a grander, imperial scale? You feel a certain detachment, a sense of watching yourself navigate these early years. You are dutiful, yes, but there's a core of you that remains untouched, observant. You learn to read people, to understand the unspoken currents in a room, the subtle shifts in power and favor. These are lessons not taught by any tutor, but absorbed through the pores in the drafty corridors of your constrained existence. Sometimes, late at night, when the castle is silent save for the sighing of the wind and the distant chime of the town clock, you might allow yourself to dream, not of princes and balls, perhaps, but of something more, a life less ordinary, a stage larger than the cramped drawing rooms of Stettin or Zerbst, the whispers of your mother's connections, tales of the glittering Russian court, of the powerful Empress Elizabeth, might drift into your consciousness. Russia, a land of snow and splendor, of immense power and almost mythical grandeur. It seems as far away as the moon, an impossible fantasy. You are, after all, just Sophie, a German princess from a minor house. What could you possibly offer such a world? And yet, the thought, once it takes root, is hard to dismiss. It's a tiny ember glowing in the quiet darkness of your provincial life. You are intelligent, you are learning, and you are perhaps more ambitious than you let anyone see. The world is a chess game, and even a pawn, if it reaches the other side of the board, can become a queen. For now, though, you practice your French, mind your manners, and try to stay warm. The Baltic wind can be awfully persistent. You learn the art of patience, the long game, though you don't yet know what game you're truly playing, or how unimaginably high the stakes will become. The scent of damp wool and wood smoke fills your small chamber, a familiar, almost comforting backdrop to the restless stirring in your young heart. The familiar scent of damp wool and wood smoke, the persistent Baltic wind sighing outside your window. These have been the unassuming constants of your young life. That tiny ember of something more, glowing so quietly within you, is about to be fanned by an unexpected gust from the east. It arrives not with a thunderclap, but with the mundane thud of a messenger's satchel on a hall table downstairs, the weary tones of a man who has ridden far and fast. A letter, not just any letter, but one bearing seals that make your mother, Johanna, practically levitate with a mixture of excitement and barely concealed panic. It arrives on a dreary winter's day, the sky the color of lead, perhaps a light, insistent rain tapping against the window panes, mirroring the quickening beat of your own heart as you sense the shift in the household's atmosphere. The news, when it's finally shared, feels less like a reality and more like a page torn from one of those improbable French novels you devour in secret. You, Sophie Friederike, August von Anhalt-Zerbst, are summoned to the vast, glittering, and notoriously perilous Russian Empire. Empress Elizabeth Petrovna, daughter of Peter the Great, ruler of all the Russias, requests your presence. The official reason for you to meet her nephew and heir, Peter Ulrich, Duke of Holstein-Gottorp, your own second cousin. The unspoken implication hangs heavy in the air, thick with the scent of beeswax from the letter's seal, and your mother's suddenly cloying perfume. You are being considered as a bride for the future Tsar of Russia. Russia. The name itself conjures images of endless snow-covered lands, onion domes gleaming gold against icy blue skies, and a court so opulent it makes the modest splendors of German principalities look like a vicar's tea party. Your mother is beside herself. She's been angling, networking, charming her way through correspondence with distant, influential relatives for years. This is the jackpot, the ultimate social and political triumph she has craved. You can almost see the calculations whirring in her eyes. The future she's painting for herself as the mother of an empress. If she could have personally embroidered your travel cloak with "Future Tsarina this way up," she probably would have. Preparations for the journey are a flurry of activity that seems almost comical in its intensity. Given the modest resources of Anhalt-Zerbst, gowns are hastily commissioned, patched, or borrowed. Jewels, such as they are polished. Your French is brushed up, your deportment scrutinized. Your mother drills you relentlessly curtsy lower, smile more winningly. Remember who's who in the tangled web of European royalty. It's like cramming for the most important examination of your life, an exam where failure means not just a bad grade, but a return to obscurity, or worse. You pack your few treasured books, a miniature portrait of your absent father, and a growing sense of trepidation mixed with a strange, exhilarating hope. You're leaving behind the only life you've known, the quiet streets of Stettin, the predictable routines, the familiar chill of your small castle room. The journey itself is an undertaking of epic proportions in the mid-18th century. It's January 1744 when you finally set out. No comfortable heated trains or swift aeroplanes, of course. You're traveling in a train of carriages and sleighs, lumbering across the frozen, snow-swept plains of northern Europe. The winter is harsh, the roads often little more than rutted tracks. Your carriage isn't exactly a luxury land yacht. Think more along the lines of a beautifully painted, but incredibly uncomfortable, wooden box on springs that seem to amplify every bump, designed by someone who clearly had a vendetta against human spines. Days are spent jolting along, wrapped in furs, the cold seeping into your bones despite the heated bricks placed at your feet. Nights are spent in coaching inns of varying quality, some surprisingly cozy with roaring fires and the smell of roasting meat, others drafty and smelling faintly of damp dogs and despair. You huddle by the fire, listening to the unfamiliar cadences of Polish or Lithuanian tongues, the world expanding with every weary mile. It is a mainstream historical fact that Empress Elizabeth of Russia had specific criteria for her nephew's bride. She desired a princess from a minor German house, politically insignificant enough not to draw Russia into unwanted foreign entanglements, yet well-bred and hopefully healthy enough to produce heirs. Your family, Sophie, fit the bill perfectly, a pawn in the larger chess game of European power, particularly attractive to Frederick the Great of Prussia, who hoped to gain influence in St. Petersburg through you and your mother. He personally recommended you, a fact that no doubt carried considerable weight. As you travel eastward, the landscape changes, the forests grow denser, the villages more scattered. You pass through Riga, a bustling port city, a brief taste of a more cosmopolitan life, before plunging back into the seemingly endless expanse of the Russian winter. Your mother, Johanna, is in her element, relishing the attention, the sense of importance. She chatters. She plans. She advises. Sometimes, you just want to tell her to put a sock in it, but you don't. You listen. You nod. You absorb. You are learning. Always learning. You watch how she interacts with local dignitaries, how she flatters, how she cajoles. Some of it is effective. Some of it makes you cringe internally. The sheer scale of the journey is overwhelming. Days blur into weeks. The initial excitement gives way to a wearying monotony, broken only by the change of horses or a particularly perilous river crossing over cracking ice. You have a lot of time to think. Rocking in the dim, swaying interior of the carriage, the rhythmic creak of the leather straps and the jingle of the horses' harnesses, a constant lullaby. What awaits you in this fabled Moscow, or St. Petersburg, will the Grand Duke. Peter be kind, will the Empress, Elizabeth approve of you. The stories of the Russian court are legendary. Its magnificence, its brutality, its intricate and often deadly intrigues. It's a place where fortunes are made and lives are ruined with bewildering speed. You remember the cautionary tales whispered in the salons of Zerbst, of favorites falling from grace, of exile to Siberia. It's enough to make anyone's kidskin gloves feel a bit clammy. Some historians question whether Sophie, at the tender age of 14, fully grasped the monumental implications of this journey from its outset, or if her understanding of the power at stake evolved gradually as she neared the heart of the Russian Empire. Did you see this as a grand adventure, a fairy tale summons? Or did a more calculating, ambitious part of you already begin to sense the extraordinary, almost impossible, opportunity that lay before you? Perhaps it was a confused muddle of both. Teenage daydreams interwoven with a steely thread of burgeoning pragmatism. You are, after all, intelligent enough to understand that this isn't just about a wedding dress and a fancy title. This is about power, about survival, about shaping a destiny far removed from the quiet backwaters of Anhalt-Zerbst, the faint scent of wood smoke from distant villages, the sharp, clean air of the northern winter, the endless white plains stretching to the horizon. These become your world. You practice the few Russian phrases your mother has taught you, the sounds alien and guttural on your German tongue. You imagine the faces you will soon meet. Empress Elizabeth, a figure of almost mythical stature, who seized her own throne in a coup. Grand Duke Peter, your future husband, described by some as eccentric, by others as boorish. You try to picture him, to imagine a life by his side. It's like trying to sketch a portrait in the dark. One evening, huddled in a drafty inn, the wind howling outside like a hungry wolf. Your mother points to a star, brighter than the others in the clear, frosty sky. That, she says, her voice filled with a dramatic intensity that is entirely her own, is your star, Sophie, the star of the north. Follow it. You gaze at it, a tiny pinprick of light in the vast, indifferent darkness. It seems a fragile guide for such a momentous journey. Yet, as you continue eastward, towards the dawning light of a new life, you can't help but feel a sense of inevitability, as if you are being pulled by an invisible current towards something immense, something transformative. The quiet girl from Stettin is fading, and someone new, someone more resilient, is slowly, tentatively, beginning to take her place. The air is thick with the smell of pine resin from the torches, lighting your way into yet another snow-dusted village. The jingle of bells on the harness, the only sound in the profound stillness of the Russian night. The profound stillness of the Russian night, punctuated only by the distant jingle of sleigh bells or the howl of the wind, has been your companion for weeks. But now, that stillness gives way to a rising hum, a sense of proximity to something vast and powerful. You arrive in Moscow in February 1744, a city that seems to have sprung from a fantastical winter dream. The air is biting, colder than anything you've ever experienced, stinging your cheeks and making your breath plume in white clouds. Torches flare, casting a smoky, flickering orange glow on snow-banked streets, on the faces of curious onlookers, and on the impossibly ornate, colorful domes of churches that rise like giant, glittering confections against the bruised purple of the late evening sky. It's a sensory overload, the cacophony of Russian voices, the smell of wood smoke, unfamiliar spices, and the sheer, overwhelming grandeur of it all. The modest castles of Pomerania feel like a half-forgotten dream. You and your mother, Johanna, are swept into a whirlwind of protocol and presentation. The Winter Palace, when you later reach St. Petersburg, is a universe unto itself, a labyrinth of gilded halls, polished parquet floors that reflect the candlelight like dark water, and an endless parade of richly dressed courtiers whose whispers follow you like rustling silk. It's a far cry from the muted tones and quiet dignity of your father's household. Here, everything is amplified: the colors, the sounds, the stakes. You quickly realize that your provincial French and your Lutheran upbringing are insufficient, even liabilities, in this dazzling, demanding new world. The star of the north, your mother pointed to now, seems to be a whole galaxy, and you, a very small, very new celestial body, trying desperately to find your orbit. Your primary task, aside from not offending anyone important, which seems to be an art form in itself here, is to win the approval of Empress Elizabeth. She is an imposing figure, tall and formidable, with sharp eyes that miss nothing. She carries the aura of absolute power, the legacy of her father, Peter the Great, in every gesture. When you are presented to her, you curtsy so low you fear you might actually tip over. You try to remember all of Johanna's frantic coaching, but mostly you're just trying to breathe. Elizabeth examines you, a long, appraising look that seems to strip away all pretense. You are young, you are German, but you are here. That, at least, is a start. Then there is Grand Duke Peter. Your first meeting with him is memorable. He is a young man, not much older than you, but he seems boyish, almost childlike in his enthusiasms. He's obsessed with all things military, particularly Prussian military drills, and plays endlessly with toy soldiers. While you've been navigating the complexities of dynastic politics and cultural adaptation, he seems more concerned with the proper deployment of his miniature grenadiers. Let's just say he doesn't exactly sweep you off your feet, unless you count the distinct possibility of tripping over one of his meticulously arranged battle formations as sweeping. He speaks Russian poorly, preferring German, and makes no secret of his disdain for Russian customs. This, you intuitively sense, is not a good look for the heir to the Russian throne. You realize with chilling clarity that if you are to survive, let alone thrive, in this alien environment, you must become Russian, not just in name, but in spirit. And so, you begin your transformation. Your first and most urgent task is the language. You throw yourself into learning Russian with the ferocious determination of someone trying to decipher the operating manual for a highly complex, potentially explosive piece of alien technology. Failure is not an option. While others sleep, you are awake, surrounded by flickering candles, your tutors patiently guiding you through the strange Cyrillic script, the complex grammar, the rich, rolling cadences of the Russian tongue. The lamplight in your chamber burns late into the night. The only sounds the scratch of your quill, the murmur of your voice repeating phrases, and the distant, muffled sounds of the sleeping palace, a guard's cough, the chime of a faraway clock. It is during these nocturnal study sessions that you nearly meet your end, not through political intrigue, but through sheer exhaustion and devotion to your new cause. You insist on studying barefoot on the cold stone floors, believing it will keep you awake. Instead, you contract a severe pneumonia. For days, you hover between life and death. The court watches, whispers. Empress Elizabeth herself is concerned, not necessarily out of deep personal affection for you yet, but because a dead bride is inconvenient. Your mother, Johanna, panics and suggests bringing in a Lutheran pastor. You, however, even in your delirium, have the presence of mind to refuse, asking instead for Simeon Todorsky, your Orthodox instructor. This single act, this clear signal of your commitment to your new faith, resonates deeply with the Empress and the court. It's a masterstroke, whether calculated or instinctual. And this brings you to the next monumental step, your conversion to Russian Orthodoxy. This isn't merely a matter of changing churches. It's a profound act of cultural and political assimilation. The ceremony is lavish, public, and deeply symbolic. You renounce your Lutheran faith and are received into the Orthodox Church. It's here that Sophie Friederike August ceases to exist, and Ekaterina Alexeyevna is born. This is a mainstream historical fact. You are given the name Catherine Ekaterina, with the patronymic Alexeyevna not after your own father, but in honor of Tsar Alexis, the father of Peter the Great, thus weaving you directly into the Romanov lineage. It's a powerful statement, a grafting of your German branch onto the mighty Russian tree. The scent of incense is heavy in the air. The sound of the choir's liturgical chanting swells around you, resonant and beautiful, seeming to vibrate in your very bones. You are draped in new vestments, handed a lighted taper. You repeat the vows in your increasingly fluent Russian. The sincerity of Catherine's embrace of orthodoxy is something that academic discourse continues to explore. Was it a purely pragmatic move by an ambitious young woman, or did she find genuine spiritual solace and connection within its rituals and tenets? For now, what matters is the outward show, and your performance is flawless. You look the part. You sound the part. You are Ekaterina. The relief in the Empress's eyes is palpable. You have passed another crucial test. Meanwhile, your mother, Johanna, is not covering herself in glory. While you are studiously transforming yourself into a model Russian Grand Duchess, she is, to put it mildly, a diplomatic incident waiting to happen. She's indiscreet, meddles in politics, tries to act as an agent for Frederick the Great of Prussia, and generally makes a nuisance of herself. She complains about the food, the customs, the sheer Russianness of Russia. It's a stark contrast to your own careful efforts. You watch her, learning what not to do. The court dresses here are magnificent, if rather like wearing a small, beautifully upholstered carriage, and the hairstyles. You suspect some of the more elaborate coiffures could conceal a family of squirrels, or at least a decent lunch. Johanna, however, seems to find fault even with the diamonds. Her missteps eventually become too much for Empress Elizabeth, who has little tolerance for foreign busybodies, especially those who remind her of Prussian interference. Johanna is eventually, and not so politely, asked to leave Russia, effectively banished from the court shortly after your wedding. It's a harsh lesson, but one you absorb in this court. You stand or fall on your own merits, your own discretion. Your days become a routine of lessons, religious instruction, and public appearances. You're constantly observed, your every word and gesture analyzed. You learn to smile graciously, even when your fiancé, Peter, is parading his toy soldiers through your chambers or drunkenly serenading his pug. You learn to navigate the shifting alliances of the court, to identify potential allies and steer clear of those who might wish you ill. You are polite to everyone, but you confide in few. The nights remain your sanctuary, your time for study, for reflection. The lamplight in your window is a small beacon of your relentless effort, a silent testament to your will to succeed. You are no longer just Sophie. You are Ekaterina, Grand Duchess of Russia. You have a new name, a new faith, and a dawning awareness that the path ahead is fraught with peril, but also with an opportunity so vast it almost frightens you. The soft glow of the icon lamps in the corner of your room casts a warm, gentle light. A small comfort in the immense, still alien grandeur of your new home. The soft glow of the icon lamps in your chamber has become a small, steady comfort in the immense, often bewildering, grandeur of the Russian court. You are Ekaterina Alexeyevna, Grand Duchess of Russia. Your new name and faith, like a freshly donned, elaborate costume you are still learning to inhabit with ease. The next act of your life begins with your wedding to Grand Duke Peter in August 1745. The ceremony is an explosion of Orthodox ritual and imperial splendor, a dazzling spectacle for the court and the nation. Gold glitters everywhere, on priestly vestments, on icons, on the impossibly ornate uniforms of the guards. The air is thick with incense and the soaring voices of the choir. You go through the motions, a poised and radiant bride, your Russian now polished, your understanding of the ceremony complete. Yet, beneath the public display, there's a hollowness. The marriage, you already sense, is a political necessity, not a union of hearts. Your wedding night, and indeed the nights that follow, are marked by Peter's indifference and immaturity, a stark contrast to the passionate romances you've read about. The vast, silk-draped bed feels more like a gilded cage than a lover's bower. And so begin the long years under the formidable, watchful wing of Empress Elizabeth. These are years of waiting, of observing, of learning the intricate dance of survival and advancement at one of Europe's most powerful and unpredictable courts. Elizabeth is the sun around which this entire world orbits. She is deeply, passionately Russian, a ruler who embodies both the grandeur and the volatile temperament of her empire. She is devout, attending lengthy church services with unwavering piety, yet she also possesses an almost insatiable appetite for pleasure, extravagant balls that last till dawn, magnificent gowns it said she owned thousands, a fact that would make even a modern fashion influencer's jaw drop, and a court that glitters with opulence. You learn to navigate her moods, to anticipate her desires, to offer the quiet, intelligent deference she expects. You spend hours in her presence, often in companionable silence, or listening to her reminiscences, her pronouncements on matters of state and faith. You learn the art of looking deeply interested during incredibly long sermons and equally lengthy state dinners. It's a skill, you suspect, that will prove invaluable. Empress Elizabeth took a keen interest in foreign policy, and it is a mainstream historical fact that she largely guided Russia through the tumultuous 7 Years' War, 1756-1763, often allying with Austria and France against Frederick the Great's Prussia. This puts you, a former German princess, and your husband Peter, an ardent admirer of all things Prussian, in an exceedingly delicate position. You watch Peter openly champion Frederick, even as Russian soldiers are dying in battle against Prussian forces. It's an act of breathtaking political stupidity, and you learn from his mistakes, cultivating an air of quiet Russian patriotism. Your German origins carefully veiled beneath your devotion to your new homeland. The distant sounds of cannons and the news from the front lines are a constant, unsettling hum beneath the surface of court life. Lamplight often finds you poring over maps, trying to understand the shifting tides of the conflict, the strategies, the implications for Russia, and for your own precarious future. Your own chambers become a sanctuary, a library, a schoolroom. While Peter drills his Holstein troops in the palace courtyards or plays with his beloved toy soldiers, his enthusiasm for miniature warfare far outstripping any interest in actual governance. Or indeed, in you. You embark on a rigorous course of self-education. You devour books, history, philosophy, jurisprudence. You discover the Enlightenment thinkers Montesquieu's The Spirit of the Laws, Voltaire's biting satires and philosophical tales, the Encyclopédie of Diderot and d'Alembert. These books are your secret companions, opening up new worlds of thought, new ideas about governance, justice, and the rights of man. The flickering candlelight illuminates page after page, your mind racing, absorbing, questioning. You write voluminous notes, you reflect, you begin to form your own ideas about how a state should be run, how a monarch should rule. It's a silent, solitary preparation for a role you do not yet know if you will ever play. The loneliness of your marriage is profound. Peter is, to put it charitably, an unconventional husband. He is erratic, often cruel in a thoughtless, childish way, and openly parades his mistresses. The vast state apartments you share often feel empty, the silence broken only by the distant strains of a court orchestra, or the wind whistling around the eaves of the Winter Palace on a bleak St. Petersburg night. You are young, intelligent, and possessed of your own desires. It is perhaps inevitable that you seek solace and affection elsewhere. Discreetly, carefully, you begin to form your own attachments. Sergei Saltykov, a handsome and charming courtier, becomes your first significant lover. Then comes the birth of your son, Paul, in 1754. The succession is paramount, and the arrival of an heir is met with widespread rejoicing. Empress Elizabeth is overjoyed. However, your joy is quickly overshadowed. Elizabeth, in her autocratic way, effectively confiscates the child. Paul is whisked away to her own apartments, to be raised under her direct supervision. You are permitted only fleeting, formal visits. The pain of this separation is immense, a raw ache that you must conceal beneath a veneer of grateful submission. The true paternity of Paul Petrovich has long been a subject of speculation, and scholarly opinion varies significantly, with some historians suggesting Saltykov was indeed the father, while others maintain Peter was, or that it ultimately doesn't alter Paul's legal status as heir. Regardless of his biological father, Paul is officially Peter's son and the Romanov heir, and he is Elizabeth's to control. This act, more than any other, underscores your powerlessness as Grand Duchess. You are a vessel for the succession, a player in Elizabeth's grand dynastic theater. Despite this, you continue to learn, to grow. You observe Elizabeth's methods of rule, her shrewd understanding of power, her ability to command loyalty, her deep connection with the Russian Orthodox Church and the common people. You also see her flaws, her caprice, her extravagance, her tendency to be swayed by favorites. You are like a dedicated student of statecraft, with the entire Russian Empire as your unwilling and often unknowing faculty. You attend court functions, your smile serene, your eyes missing nothing. You cultivate allies carefully, discreetly, You learn who to trust and who to flatter. The court is a labyrinth of whispers, of shifting alliances, of hidden rivalries. You tread carefully, your every step measured. Sometimes, when the endless ceremonies and stifling protocol become too much, you retreat to your books, the quiet companionship of Voltaire and Montesquieu, a soothing balm to your often frayed nerves. You can almost hear their imagined voices in the quiet of your lamplit room, discussing reason, justice, and the ideal form of government, a stark contrast to the often irrational theatrics of the court outside your door, the distant sounds of St. Petersburg, a troika's bells, a boatman's call from the Neva, the chime of the Peter and Paul Cathedral filter in, reminders of the vast, complex country you hope one day to understand, perhaps even to lead. The distant, muffled sounds of St. Petersburg, a boatman's song drifting from the Neva, the lonely chime of the Peter and Paul Cathedral marking another hour of your gilded captivity, often filter into your chambers. These are the soundscapes of your long years as Grand Duchess, years spent learning, observing, and enduring under the watchful, often capricious, eye of Empress Elizabeth, while you've been diligently cultivating your Russian persona and devouring Enlightenment philosophy by flickering lamplight. The central fixture of your public life, your marriage to Grand Duke Peter, continues its slow, inexorable unraveling. It's less a union and more a prolonged, awkward armistice punctuated by his baffling behavior and your increasingly weary forbearance. Imagine a quiet evening in your shared apartments within the vast Winter Palace, or, more accurately, your adjacent apartments, as separate bedchambers have long been a silent testament to the Arctic chill between you. Perhaps a soft rain is falling outside, streaking the enormous windows, the rhythmic drumming a counterpoint to the tension that always seems to simmer just beneath the surface. You might be trying to lose yourself in the pages of Montesquieu, seeking solace in reason and order. When the sounds erupt from Peter's quarters, the clumsy squeak of a poorly played violin, he fancies himself a musician. The barked commands to his long-suffering valets, whom he forces to play soldier, or the telltale slurred singing that indicates he's deep into his cups. Peter's idea of a stimulating conversation often revolves around the superiority of Prussian military discipline, or a rambling complaint about the stifling religiosity of the Russian court. He might burst into your rooms unannounced, reeking of wine, to show off a new button for his Holstein uniform, or to demand you admire his latest portrait of Frederick the Great. You learn to mask your exasperation with a carefully neutral expression, a slight, enigmatic smile that gives nothing away. It's a performance, honed over years of practice. His admiration for Prussia, and particularly for its king, Frederick the Great, is more than just a passing fancy. It's an obsession. This is a mainstream historical fact. Grand Duke Peter openly idolized Frederick, Russia's chief enemy during the 7 Years' War. He would often wear Prussian uniforms, decorate his rooms with Frederick's portraits, and speak glowingly of Prussian military prowess, all while Russian soldiers were bleeding and dying on battlefields fighting that very army. It's an astonishing lack of political sense, a public relations disaster that alienates him from the fiercely patriotic Russian nobility, the military, and the clergy. You watch this display with a mixture of disbelief and a dawning, cold calculation. His folly could, perversely, become your opportunity. He makes no secret of his contempt for Russia, its church, its customs, even its language, which he still speaks with a thick German accent and obvious reluctance. He refers to St. Petersburg as Siberia in his letters, longing for his dreary little duchy of Holstein-Gottorp. His affections, such as they are reserved for his dogs, his toy soldiers, and his mistress, Elizaveta Vorontsova. She is not, by most accounts, a classical beauty, indeed, unkind wags at court, and you've heard a few describe her with a distinct lack of charity. You, with your intelligence, grace, and cultivated charm, are a stark contrast. Yet Peter is devoted to Vorontsova in his own peculiar way, showering her with attention while treating you with a mixture of neglect and boorish disdain. You often find yourself the subject of his public humiliations, sneering comments about your intellect, your appearance, or your supposed infertility after the birth of Paul. At least his infatuation with Vorontsova keeps him somewhat occupied. You might reflect sardonically in the privacy of your lamplit chamber. It's a small, bitter crumb of comfort. Your shared living space often feels less like a grand ducal residence and more like a poorly managed barracks on your side, and a strangely empty museum of Prussian paraphernalia on his. You've often fantasized about soundproofing your library with extra thick tapestries and a formidable wall of sheer willpower, especially during his late-night flute recitals. Naturally, you seek companionship and intellectual connection elsewhere. The Polish diplomat Stanisław Poniatowski, handsome, cultured, and intelligent, becomes a significant figure in your life. He is a man of the world, fluent in the language of the Enlightenment, someone with whom you can actually discuss Voltaire and the future of Europe. Your relationship with him is a quiet solace, a warmth in the otherwise frigid landscape of your marriage. It's a dangerous game, of course. The walls of the palace have ears, and Empress Elizabeth's spies are everywhere. But the loneliness, the sheer intellectual starvation of your life with Peter, makes the risk seem bearable. Historians continue to analyze the complex interplay of personal and political motives in Catherine's relationships during this period. For instance, the degree to which her affair with Poniatowski was driven by genuine affection versus a calculated move to secure a potential political ally with ties to the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth is a point of ongoing scholarly debate. What is clear is that these connections provide you with a much-needed emotional outlet and a reminder that there is a world beyond Peter's toy soldiers and childish tantrums. As Empress Elizabeth's health begins to fail in the late 1750s, the atmosphere at court grows heavier, more charged with unspoken anxieties. Peter makes no secret of his intentions once he ascends the throne. He speaks openly of divorcing you, of sending you to a convent, the traditional Russian way of disposing of inconvenient wives. He might even, he implies, declare your son Paul illegitimate, paving the way for him to marry Vorontsova and secure his own line. The threat is very real. You are, after all, a foreigner, with no powerful family in Russia to protect you once Elizabeth, your sometimes stern but ultimately consistent protector, is gone. The nights grow longer, the shadows in your apartments deeper. You lie awake. The distant city sounds, perhaps a night watchman's call, or the mournful hoot of an owl from the summer garden, doing little to soothe your racing thoughts. Your books are your only steadfast companions, their pages offering wisdom, perspective, and perhaps a blueprint for survival. The unraveling of your union with Peter is not just a personal tragedy. It's a political powder keg. His instability, his pro-Prussian mania, his disdain for everything Russian. These are not qualities that endear him to a proud and powerful empire. You, on the other hand, have spent years meticulously crafting your image the devout convert, the loving mother at least in public perception. Despite Paul's upbringing by Elizabeth, the intelligent and cultured Grand Duchess who respects Russian traditions. The contrast between you and your husband becomes increasingly stark, noticed by influential figures in the military, the nobility, and even the church. The threads of your marriage are not just fraying, they are snapping, one by one, setting the stage for a future crisis that will demand all your courage, all your intelligence, and all the allies you have so carefully cultivated in the quiet, lamplit corners of your constrained existence. The flickering lamplight in your apartments often illuminates more than just the pages of Voltaire or Montesquieu these days. It reflects in your thoughtful eyes as you gaze out at the vast, sleeping city of St. Petersburg, a city whose fate, and your own, hangs precariously in the balance. The unraveling of your marriage to Peter, his increasingly erratic behavior, and his thinly veiled threats to dispose of you once he assumes full power have pushed you beyond mere endurance. Survival now demands action, a quiet, calculated gathering of strength, the distant sound of a lone horseman clattering over cobblestones, or the mournful cry of a night bird from the direction of the dark, sprawling summer garden, seems to underscore the secrecy and urgency of your burgeoning plans. You know, with a chilling certainty, that to do nothing is to invite ruin. Your attention turns, with meticulous care, towards the true arbiters of power in the Russian Empire, the elite guards regiments, the Preobrazhensky, the Semyonovsky, the Izmailovsky. These are not just soldiers. They are a privileged, politically potent force, stationed in the capital, deeply intertwined with the nobility, and with a history of making and unmaking czars. It's a crucial historical fact that the Imperial Guards had been instrumental in several previous palace coups, including the one that brought Empress Elizabeth herself to the throne in 1741. Their loyalty is the bedrock of any ruler's security, their disaffection a fatal weakness. And Peter, with his open contempt for Russia and his obsession with his own contingent of ill-disciplined Holstein troops, whom he clearly favors, is doing everything in his power to alienate them. He tries to impose harsh Prussian discipline, changes their comfortable Russian uniforms for tighter, unfamiliar Prussian styles, and generally treats them with a disdain that breeds deep resentment. You hear the whispers from the barracks, the disgruntled murmurs in the officers' messes. Peter is, in essence, handing you a gift-wrapped opportunity. You begin to cultivate these powerful men, not with overt plotting, but with subtle charm, with quiet dignity, with a display of sincere devotion to Russia and the Orthodox faith that stands in stark, favorable contrast to Peter's alien affectations. At court functions, while Peter is perhaps loudly praising Frederick the Great or drunkenly insulting a revered Russian general, you engage officers in thoughtful conversation. You remember their names, their regiments, their concerns. You speak of your love for your son, Paul, the heir to the throne. You listen more than you speak, your intelligent eyes conveying understanding and sympathy. You become a master of the seemingly casual encounter in a quiet palace corridor or a secluded garden alcove. "Ah, Captain Orlov," you might murmur, your voice soft. "How fares the brave Semyonovsky regiment? Such a comfort to know Russia is protected by such loyal hearts, especially in these uncertain times." A shared glance, a moment of unspoken understanding, can be more potent than 1,000 treasonous words. And then there are the Orlov brothers. Grigory Grigorievich Orlov, a tall, dashingly handsome artillery officer in the Guards, becomes more than just an ally. He becomes your lover, your confidant, your most ardent champion. He is brave, charismatic, and utterly devoted to you. He and his 4 brothers, Alexei, a man of formidable strength and reckless courage, Ivan, Fyodor, and Vladimir, form the nucleus of a growing conspiracy. They are not, perhaps, the most sophisticated political theorists. You won't find them quoting Montesquieu back at you. Their enthusiasm for your cause, however, and particularly Grigory's passionate devotion to you, is as powerful as a cannonade and far more strategically useful than Peter's entire collection of miniature Prussian grenadiers. The Orlovs have connections throughout the Guards, a network of friends and fellow officers who share their discontent with Peter and their admiration for you. Secret meetings take place, often under the cloak of darkness. Perhaps you slip away from the stifling atmosphere of the palace, disguised, to a quiet dacha on the outskirts of the city, the scent of pine and damp earth filling the night air. Or maybe a trusted messenger arranges a rendezvous in a dimly lit apartment in a less conspicuous part of St. Petersburg. The only sounds the hiss of the samovar and the low, urgent murmur of voices, lamplight, or the soft glow of a few carefully shielded candles casts flickering shadows on earnest faces as plans are discussed. Support is pledged, and risks are weighed. The taste of strong Russian tea, or perhaps a quick shot of vodka to ward off the chill and steady the nerves, becomes associated with these clandestine gatherings. You listen intently, offering guidance, caution, and encouragement. You are the calm center of this nascent storm. Other key figures are drawn into your orbit. Princess Ekaterina Dashkova, your young, impetuous, and fiercely intelligent friend, and the sister of Peter's mistress, Elizaveta Vorontsova, adding another layer of delicious irony to the situation, throws herself into the cause with passionate zeal. She fancies herself a grand conspirator, a kingmaker, or rather, an empress maker. There's also Count Nikita Panin, Paul's influential tutor, a more cautious and statesmanlike figure. He is concerned for the future of Russia and for the rights of his young charge. Paul. His support is more measured, perhaps conditional, but crucial nonetheless. He represents a more moderate faction, one that lends an air of legitimacy to your cause. Scholarly interpretations differ on Catherine's precise role in orchestrating the conspiracy. Was she the active driving force, meticulously planning every move? Or was she a more reactive figure, skillfully capitalizing on the initiatives of ambitious supporters like the Orlovs and Dashkova? Perhaps the truth, as is often the case, lies somewhere in between. You are undeniably the focal point, the symbol, the only viable alternative to Peter's impending misrule. But you are also astute enough to allow others to take the lead in the more overt, dangerous aspects of the plotting, providing inspiration and a promise of future reward. Meanwhile, Peter remains blissfully, almost comically, oblivious. He's too busy drilling his Holsteiners, redesigning their uniforms to be even more Prussian, and planning how he will humble the Orthodox Church once he is Tsar. His grasp of the political undercurrents swirling around him is akin to a man trying to catch smoke with a sieve. Each blunder he makes, each influential group he alienates, strengthens your position. He dismisses warnings, supremely confident in his divine right and his imagined military prowess. As Empress Elizabeth's life ebbs away through the autumn and early winter of 1761, the tension becomes almost unbearable. Every cough from the Empress's chambers, every somber-faced physician emerging, sends ripples of anxiety and anticipation through your circle. The nights are filled with whispered consultations, the exchange of coded messages written in disappearing ink or delivered by trusted servants who navigate the shadowy back corridors of the vast palace. You feign grief and concern for the dying Empress, playing your public role flawlessly, even as your mind races with the possibilities and perils that lie just ahead. The future of Russia and your own life hangs by the slenderest of threads, a thread that is being woven in secret, in the dim lamplight of clandestine meetings, under the watchful eyes of the loyal guards. The lamplit clandestine meetings, the whispered assurances of loyalty from burly guards officers, the subtle weaving of your network of support. All this has been conducted under the lengthening shadow of Empress Elizabeth's declining health. Then, on Christmas Day 1761, by the Julian calendar still used in Russia early January 1762, by the Gregorian calendar of the West, the inevitable happens. Empress Elizabeth, the formidable daughter of Peter the Great, breathes her last. The great bells of St. Petersburg begin to toll, their deep, mournful vibrations seeming to seep into the very stones of the Winter Palace, a somber sound echoing through the frosty night air. A chapter closes, and with a chilling immediacy, a new, terrifying one begins. Your husband, Grand Duke Peter, is now Peter III, Tsar and autocrat of all the Russias. The air in your apartments suddenly feels colder, the flickering candlelight casting longer, more menacing shadows on the walls. The future you've been anxiously anticipating and secretly preparing for is here. What follows is a masterclass in how to alienate an entire empire in roughly 6 months. Peter, finally unleashed from Elizabeth's control, embarks on a series of policies and personal behaviors so breathtakingly ill-judged they almost seem designed to provoke rebellion. It's as if he has a checklist of every powerful group in Russia and is determined to offend each one systematically. His brief reign is a cascade of follies, each more damaging than the last. You watch, outwardly the dutiful wife, grieving for the late Empress and submissive to the new Tsar, but inwardly, your mind is a whirlwind of observation, calculation, and a growing sense of astonishment at his sheer ineptitude. One of his very first acts is a diplomatic bombshell. It's a stark historical fact that Peter III immediately and unilaterally withdrew Russia from the 7 Years' War, abandoning hard-won territories like East Prussia, which Russian troops had occupied, and forming an alliance with his idol, Frederick the Great of Prussia, the very man Russia had been fighting at enormous cost in blood and treasure. He doesn't just make peace, he fawns over Frederick, effectively switching sides and betraying Russia's allies, Austria and France. The military is aghast. Generals who had sacrificed their men to defeat the Prussians now see their victories casually thrown away. It's a national humiliation, a betrayal that cuts deep into the army's pride. Peter's approach to foreign policy seems less about calculated national interest and more like a starstruck fanboy finally getting to meet his hero and offering him the keys to the kingdom. It's not a move that wins hearts and minds back in St. Petersburg, you note with grim satisfaction. Next, he turns his reforming zeal, if one can call it that, upon the army itself, particularly the revered guards regiments, the very men whose loyalty you have so carefully cultivated. He attempts to impose rigid Prussian discipline, orders them to wear tight, uncomfortable Prussian-style uniforms in place of their traditional Russian ones, and openly favors his own contingent of Holstein troops, whom he plans to lead in a bizarre war against Denmark to reclaim the Duchy of Schleswig for his native Holstein. This proposed war is deeply unpopular. The Guards have no interest in fighting and dying for Peter's obscure German territorial ambitions. They are Russian soldiers, not Holstein mercenaries. Their grumbling, once hushed, now grows louder, more openly contemptuous. The barracks at night are filled with angry whispers, and you can be sure the Orloff brothers are skillfully fanning these flames of discontent. Then, as if to ensure no one is left unoffended, Peter takes aim at the Russian Orthodox Church. He speaks openly of secularizing all church lands, a policy Elizabeth had cautiously begun, but which Peter pursues with aggressive, tactless haste. He expresses his Lutheran sympathies, mocks Orthodox rituals, and reportedly discusses forcing priests to shave their iconic beards and adopt vestments more akin to Protestant pastors. The clergy, a deeply conservative and influential force in Russian society, is horrified. His ideas for church reform, such as they are, go over about as well as suggesting the Easter feast be replaced with lukewarm cabbage water. Some traditions, especially those intertwined with centuries of faith and national identity, are best left undisturbed, a lesson Peter seems utterly incapable of grasping. His personal conduct only pours fuel on the fire. He is frequently drunk in public, engages in crude buffoonery, and treats the memory of Empress Elizabeth with disrespect, even before she is cold in her grave. He openly flaunts his mistress, Elizaveta Vorontsova, showering her with honors and making it clear he intends to divorce you and perhaps marry her. He speaks of you, his wife and the mother of the heir, with open contempt, further alienating those who see you as a symbol of dignity and Russian piety. Peter seems to be collecting powerful enemies as if they were rare stamps or, more appropriately, limited edition Prussian toy soldiers. If there were an Imperial Russian award for most efficient alienation of an entire populace, he would be the undisputed champion, probably accepting the prize in a badly fitting Prussian uniform. The historical debate continues over whether Peter III's whirlwind of reforms indicated a capacity for enlightened, albeit erratic, leadership, or if they were simply the chaotic actions of an immature and fundamentally unstable ruler unable to comprehend the society he governed. Some of his edicts, like the abolition of the dreaded secret chancellery, or the manifesto freeing the nobility from compulsory state service, were actually popular in some quarters or had long-term positive implications. But the manner of their implementation, his abrasive personality, and his catastrophic foreign and religious policies overshadowed any potential good. He was, in short, his own worst enemy. Through all this, you remain a model of decorum and quiet suffering. You attend church services with visible devotion. Your head bowed, your expression somber. You are seen weeping at Elizabeth's tomb. You play the part of the wronged but dignified wife, the concerned mother for young Paul. Every public blunder Peter makes, every group he offends, only serves to elevate you in comparison. The lamplight in your study continues to burn late, but now it illuminates not just books, but also hushed, urgent consultations with Grigory Orlov, with Princess Dashkova, with others who see the looming catastrophe and believe you are the only one who can avert it. The time for waiting, for mere observation, is rapidly drawing to a close. Peter's follies are accelerating the timeline, pushing the conspiracy towards its inevitable, dangerous climax. The city outside your windows feels like a tinderbox, and Peter, with his foolish pronouncements and Prussian affectations, is dancing around it with a lit torch. The soft rain that often falls on St. Petersburg seems to weep for the state of the empire, even as it provides a gentle, muffling cloak for the urgent, whispered plans for its salvation. The soft, persistent rain that so often washes over St. Petersburg seems to have paused, holding its breath, as the early summer of 1762 unfolds. Peter III, with his cascade of follies, has indeed turned the city, the army, and the church into a tinderbox. The air is thick with unspoken resentments and the nervous energy of your co-conspirators. Each night, as you lay your head on your pillow in the relative seclusion of Peterhof, the grand summer palace by the sea, you wonder if this will be the night the spark ignites. The distant lapping of waves from the Gulf of Finland is a constant, restless sound, mirroring your own internal state. Peter is mostly at his own nearby estate, Oranienbaum, drilling his beloved Holsteiners, and, by all accounts, planning to arrest you and formally declare Elizaveta Vorontsova his consort. The fuse is lit. It's just a question of when the explosion will occur. It happens in the deep, velvet darkness of late June, specifically the night of the 27th, stretching into the pre-dawn hours of the 28th. One of your key conspirators, a Captain Pasek of the Preobrazhensky Regiment, has been arrested. The news spreads like wildfire through your network. This is it. The plan must be accelerated, or all is lost. If they wait, Peter will pick them off one by one. The carefully laid Orlov gambit must now be played, and played decisively. The summons comes for you in the dead of night. You are asleep in your bed at Montplaisir, your small villa at Peterhof, when a frantic, trusted servant rouses you. Alexei Orlov, Grigory's fierce and formidable brother, is here. He has ridden like a man possessed from the city. Imagine the scene, the hushed urgency, the servant's wide, frightened eyes in the flickering candlelight. Alexei, his face grim, his uniform dusty from the hard ride, doesn't waste words. "It is time," he might say, his voice a low rumble. "Pasek is taken. We must move now, or we are all undone. The guards await you in St. Petersburg." This isn't a polite invitation to a tea party. This is Alexei Orlov at your bedside at 2 a.m, essentially saying, "Greetings, your Imperial Highness-to-be. It's time to risk your neck and seize an empire. Try not to scuff your slippers on the way out." There's no time for doubt, no room for hesitation. This is the precipice. You dress quickly, simply, perhaps in a plain dark gown, the kind that doesn't scream Empress, but rather woman of serious purpose. You leave your young son Paul sleeping, blissfully unaware of the seismic shift about to occur. With Alexei and a handful of loyal attendants, you slip out of Peterhof, the vast palace silent and dark around you, and into a waiting carriage. The horse's hooves are muffled on the dusty road as you begin the desperate 20-mile race to St. Petersburg, the sky above still inky black, perhaps a sliver of a waning moon offering little comfort. The cool night air rushes past your face, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Every shadow could conceal a patrol loyal to Peter. Every distant sound could be an alarm. You arrive at the barracks of the Izmailovsky Regiment just as the first pale, ghostly fingers of dawn are beginning to touch the eastern sky. Grigory Orlov and your other key supporters are there, their faces drawn with anxiety, but resolute. This is the first crucial test. Will they follow you? Grigory steps forward, his voice ringing out in the stillness of the barrack square, addressing the soldiers who are tumbling out, sleepy and confused. He speaks of Peter's tyranny, his contempt for Russia, his intention to destroy the guards, and then he presents you, Ekaterina Alexeyevna, their Grand Duchess, the mother of their future Tsar, a true patriot. You speak too, your voice clear and firm despite the tremor of fear in your heart. You appeal to their loyalty, their faith, their love for Russia, and they respond. A cheer goes up, then another, swelling into a roar. Vivat Ekaterina, long live Catherine. Soldiers rush to kiss your hand, your dress, swearing allegiance. It's a torrent of emotion, of relief, of hope. The Izmailovsky are yours. This is the moment the tide truly turns. The coup was remarkably swift, and it's a mainstream historical fact that on June 28, 1762, old-style Catherine, with the backing of the guards, was able to secure the capital with astonishing speed and minimal bloodshed. From the Izmailovsky barracks, your procession, now swelling with soldiers, marches to the Semyonovsky regiment. They too declare for you. Then the Preobrazhensky, the most prestigious regiment of all. It's a domino effect, a wave of support that sweeps through the awakening city. Priests from nearby churches join your ranks, bestowing their blessing. Civilians pour into the streets, cheering, sensing the monumental change underway. You make your way to the Kazan Cathedral, the great church on Nevsky Prospect. There, in a solemn, hastily arranged ceremony, the Archbishop of Novgorod proclaims you autocrat and empress of all the Russias. The scent of incense, the sound of prayers and triumphant shouts, the sight of grizzled veterans and young ensigns alike kneeling before you. It's a heady, almost overwhelming experience. You've gone from a threatened Grand Duchess to an Empress in the space of a few extraordinary hours. It's almost easier than you anticipated, perhaps not quite as simple as finding a reliable laundress in Anhalt-Zerbst, but surprisingly smooth, turns out, making yourself popular for 17 years while your husband acts like a boor has its perks. Meanwhile, what of Peter news of your triumphant entry into St. Petersburg finally reaches him at Oranienbaum. He is, by all accounts, bewildered, then furious, then terrified. His reaction is a masterclass in indecision. He dithers, he paces, he shouts. He sends confused orders. He tries to rally his Holstein troops, but they are a pitiful force against the might of the Russian guards. He considers marching on St. Petersburg, then loses his nerve. He flees to Kronstadt, the island fortress commanding the sea approach to the capital, hoping to find loyal troops there, only to be met with cannons aimed squarely at his ship and the chilling news that the garrison has already sworn allegiance to Empress Catherine II. Peter, it seems, reacted to the coup with the strategic acumen of a particularly bewildered badger. His counteroffensive strategy appeared to consist mainly of wondering aloud where his favorite Prussian-made flute had vanished to. The degree to which the coup's ultimate success hinged on the meticulous groundwork laid by Catherine and the Orlovs, as opposed to a sequence of opportunistic maneuvers and Peter III's own catastrophic incompetence, remains a subject thoroughly examined by historians. Was it a perfectly executed plan, or a daring improvisation that caught a lucky break? Likely a bit of both. Your conspirators, led by the energetic Orlovs and the zealous Princess Dashkova, move swiftly to secure key points in the city, the Winter Palace which Peter had conveniently vacated, the Senate, the arsenals. Anyone suspected of strong loyalty to Peter is quietly detained. By midday, You are at the Winter Palace, the vast imperial residence, receiving oaths of allegiance from nobles, officials, and military officers. The city is yours. The gamble has paid off. The night of terror and uncertainty has given way to a dawn of astonishing triumph. The distant sounds of the city are no longer menacing. They are the sounds of celebration, of a new era beginning. The lamplight that guided your secret studies and clandestine meetings has been replaced by the brilliant, almost blinding, light of an imperial throne, seized not by inheritance, but by courage, by political skill, and by the collective will of those who believed in you. The Orlov gambit was a desperate, high-stakes throw of the dice. But as the sun climbs high over St. Petersburg, it's clear you've won the jackpot. The brilliant, almost blinding light of an imperial throne, seized with such astonishing speed, now illuminates your path. The echoes of Vivat Ekaterina still seem to resonate in the vast halls of the Winter Palace, but the initial exultation of the coup gives way to the sobering realities of power. The city of St. Petersburg, having held its breath during those tense pre-dawn hours, now breathes a collective sigh of relief, or perhaps of watchful anticipation. You are Empress, yes, but the throne you've just claimed is still warm from its previous, disastrous occupant, and thrones, as you well know, can be notoriously insecure. The late afternoon sun of that fateful June day casts long shadows across the polished floors as you begin the urgent, complex task of securing what you have so audaciously won. First, there is the matter of Peter. After his humiliating failure at Kronstadt, he is brought to Ropsha, an estate not far from Peterhof, under the watchful eyes of Alexei Orlov and other loyal guards officers. He is a prisoner, broken and terrified. He writes you pitiful letters, begging for his violin, his pug, and his mistress, Elizaveta Vorontsova, to be sent to him in Holstein, promising to abdicate formally. You allow him some comforts, but the abdication is non-negotiable. He signs the document, a messy scrawl from a trembling hand. Peter signed his abdication. You might reflect grimly as you read the dispatched news in your candlelit study late one night. With all the grace of a condemned man ordering his last, very unappetizing meal. Still, it's done. The ink on that document is barely dry when, just a week after the coup, on July 6, 1762, news arrives from Ropsha. Peter III is dead. The official cause, circulated with careful haste, is an apoplectic fit brought on by hemorrhoidal colic, a truly unfortunate, if somewhat creatively specific ailment. You make a mental note to ensure any future imperial medical bulletins are perhaps a touch less imaginative. The truth, however, is far murkier and more brutal. Alexei Orlov, in a distraught and possibly drunken letter to you, confesses that Peter was killed in a brawl, an accidental consequence of rough handling by his guards. Whether it was truly accidental, or a more deliberate act to remove a dangerous rallying point for any lingering loyalists, is a secret that dies with the men in that room. The precise level of your, Catherine's, foreknowledge or tacit approval of Peter III's demise at Ropsha remains one of the most enduring and fiercely debated enigmas of your reign among historians. Did you order it? Did you merely allow it to happen? Or were you genuinely surprised and distressed by the news? Whatever your private thoughts, your public response is one of solemn grief and a grand state funeral for your late, unlamented husband. It's a necessary performance, a closing of a grim chapter. The distant, heavy tolling of church bells for Peter's soul is a somber counterpoint to the city's tentative celebrations of your accession. With Peter gone, the immediate threat of a counter-coup diminishes, but your position is far from secure. You are a German woman on the Russian throne, a usurper, even if a popular one. Legitimacy must be carefully constructed, brick by symbolic brick. Your son, Paul, is the direct Romanov heir, and some, like Nikita Panin, initially hoped you would rule merely as regent for him. You, however, have other ideas. You intend to rule in your own right. The Orlovs and your other key supporters are lavishly rewarded with titles, estates, and money. They are the new pillars of your regime. Yet, you must also be wary of becoming a puppet of the very men who helped you to power. It's a delicate balancing act, played out in late-night councils, the flickering candlelight illuminating maps of the empire and lists of names, potential allies, and potential threats. One such threat is the tragic figure of Ivan VI, the great-grandson of Ivan Theid, who had been proclaimed emperor as an infant, deposed shortly after by Elizabeth, and had languished in solitary confinement in the Schlüsselburg fortress ever since. He is a legitimate Romanov, a potential figurehead for any disgruntled faction. You order his conditions of imprisonment to be slightly eased, but also reinforce the standing order that he is to be killed immediately if any attempt is made to free him. It's a cold, pragmatic decision, a reminder of the ruthlessness required to hold on to the power you've seized. To solidify your claim and present yourself as the legitimate God-chosen ruler, preparations begin for your coronation, not in the new, Europeanized St. Petersburg, but in ancient Moscow, the spiritual heart of Russia, the city of traditional Tsarist power. In September 1762, you make your grand ceremonial entry into Moscow. The city is ablaze with color and crowds, the air filled with the peal of 1,000 church bells and the roar of the people. It is a mainstream historical fact that your coronation took place in the magnificent Uspensky Cathedral of the Dormition within the Kremlin, the same sacred space where Ivan the Terrible and Peter the Great's ancestors had been crowned for centuries. This choice of venue is deeply symbolic, linking you to the long, unbroken line of Russian monarchs, washing away the stain of your foreign birth and the irregularity of your accession. The ceremony itself is an exercise in overwhelming splendor. You are dressed in cloth of silver, diamonds glittering in your hair and around your neck, the weight of the Imperial crown of Russia, a newly made masterpiece commissioned for the occasion, heavy with gold, diamonds, pearls, and the enormous spinel ruby, is immense as it is placed upon your head by the Archbishop. You are anointed with holy oil. You receive the orb and scepter, symbols of your autocratic power. The ancient rituals unfold, rich with the scent of incense and beeswax candles, the soaring chants of the Orthodox liturgy filling the cathedral's vast, icon-covered space. You feel the gaze of history upon you, the weight of an empire settling onto your young shoulders. So, your Empress. No real pressure there. Just a sprawling, continent-sized empire, with all its myriad peoples and problems, looking to you for, well, everything. At least the regalia is stunning. You might think with a flash of your old, wry humor. The coronation is a triumph of political theater, designed to awe the populace and impress foreign courts. And it works. You emerge from the Kremlin not just as Catherine, the German princess who stole a throne, but as Ekaterina II, anointed sovereign and autocrat of all the Russias. The dawn of your reign has truly begun. In your initial manifestos, You promise to uphold the Orthodox faith, to defend the fatherland, to ensure justice and order. You speak of your maternal love for your subjects. Whether these early pronouncements reflected a genuine commitment to enlightened principles, or were simply astute political maneuvering to consolidate a still fragile grip on power, is a question that scholarly perspectives continue to explore. For now, the city of Moscow celebrates. The distant sounds of feasting and fireworks drifting through your Kremlin window late into the night. You stand there, perhaps looking out over the golden domes, the immense task ahead of you stretching out like the vast Russian landscape itself, a mixture of exhilaration and a profound, almost terrifying sense of responsibility settling upon you. The echoes of the coronation bells in ancient Moscow eventually fade, replaced by the relentless day-to-day demands of ruling the vast Russian Empire from your primary seat of power. The Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, the Imperial crown, so heavy during the ceremony, now rests on a velvet cushion, but its metaphorical weight is a constant presence on your shoulders. The late-night fireworks and celebratory feasts have given way to the quiet intensity of your study, where flickering candlelight illuminates stacks of state papers, reports from distant governors, and the beloved volumes of Enlightenment philosophy that have long been your intellectual companions. Perhaps a soft, persistent drizzle is falling outside, the kind that often blankets St. Petersburg, muffling the distant city sounds of a world settling into uneasy slumber, while you, Empress of all the Russias, are very much awake. You came to power with a mind brimming with the ideals of the Enlightenment, with the teachings of Montesquieu, Voltaire, Beccaria, and Diderot. You've corresponded with some of these great thinkers, engaging in witty, philosophical exchanges that traverse the vast distances of Europe. By slow, plodding mail coach, you're practically pen pals with Voltaire, just casual chit-chat about the nature of justice, the importance of religious toleration, and whether his latest theatrical endeavor is likely to scandalize Paris. He, in turn, flatters you outrageously, calling you the Star of the North, the Semiramis of Russia. It's a pleasant diversion, this intellectual sparring. But now you face the monumental task of translating these lofty ideals into the harsh, often intractable, realities of Russian life. This is where enlightened theory collides head-on with autocratic practice. One of your most ambitious early projects is the Legislative Commission. It is a well-documented historical fact that in 1767 you convened this grand assembly, summoning over 500 delegates from across the empire, nobles, townspeople, state peasants, Cossacks, and representatives of various non-Russian nationalities to create a new, rational, and humane code of laws. The millions of privately owned serfs, alas, were not invited to send delegates. Their voices remained unheard. For this commission, you personally drafted a remarkable document, the nakaz, or instruction. It's a lengthy treatise, drawing heavily on Montesquieu's The Spirit of the Laws and Beccaria's On Crimes and Punishments. You pour your philosophical convictions into its pages, advocating for principles like equality before the law, a radical notion in a society built on privilege, the abolition of torture and capital punishment, unless for treason, religious toleration, and measures to prevent crime rather than merely punish it. You work late into the night on the nakaz, the scratch of your quill the only sound in your study, the ideas flowing from your mind onto the paper, a blueprint for a more just and enlightened Russia. the Legislative Commission itself is an unprecedented undertaking. Imagine the scene: delegates from the frozen north, the arid steppes of the south, the forests of Siberia, all gathered in Moscow. A bewildering array of costumes, languages, and expectations. So many elaborate fur hats. So many deeply ingrained local customs. So many conflicting interests. It's like orchestrating the largest, most complex, and potentially most argumentative focus group in history. You sincerely hope this assembly will provide you with the information and the consensus needed to reform Russia from the ground up. However, the commission soon bogs down. The sheer diversity of the empire, the vast distances, the lack of education among many delegates, and above all, the deeply entrenched institution of serfdom prove formidable obstacles. The nobles, while perhaps appreciating your enlightened rhetoric in principle, are fiercely protective of their privileges, especially their right to own serfs, the source of their wealth and status. Debates rage, grievances are aired, but little concrete progress is made towards a unified law code. The elephant in the room, or rather, the millions of serfs toiling in the fields, casts a long shadow over all proceedings. Everyone might agree in hushed tones that serfdom is, well, less than ideal for a supposedly enlightened age. But actually dismantling it, that's like trying to unravel a fishing net the size of Poland, knitted from centuries of tradition and economic dependence, all while wearing imperial mittens. The commission is eventually disbanded in 1768, ostensibly due to the outbreak of war with the Ottoman Empire, having failed to produce its intended masterpiece. The sincerity of your commitment to the Enlightenment ideals articulated in the nakaz versus its potential utility as a magnificent exercise in international public relations designed to impress the philosophes and the courts of Europe, is a topic that continues to provoke lively academic discussion. Were you genuinely hoping for radical reform? Or was it a carefully stage-managed display of benevolent intent? The truth, as always, is likely complex. You are, after all, an autocrat. Your power is absolute, and any reform that might threaten that power or alienate the nobility upon whose support your throne ultimately rests must be approached with extreme caution. Despite the Legislative Commission's limited practical success, your reign does see significant cultural and administrative advancements. You are a devoted patron of the arts and sciences. You begin the collection that will become the Hermitage Museum, acquiring vast numbers of masterpieces from Western Europe. You support writers and scholars, encourage education, founding the Smolny Institute for Noble Girls, for example, and promote Russian exploration and scientific inquiry. You famously purchase Denis Diderot's library when he falls on hard times, generously allowing him to keep the books and paying him a salary to act as your librarian. It's a grand gesture, one that cements your reputation as an enlightened monarch among the European intellectual elite. Yet, the fundamental contradiction remains. How can an absolute ruler truly be enlightened in the sense that the philosophers advocated? You believe in strong, centralized authority as necessary for governing a realm as vast and diverse as Russia. You see yourself as a benevolent sovereign, working for the good of your people, even if they don't always understand what's best for them. But the ideals of liberty, of limitations on power, of popular sovereignty, these are not easily reconciled with the realities of Russian autocracy. As you sit late in your study, the candles burning low, the distant sounds of the city, perhaps the rumble of a late-night carriage on the Millionaya Street, or the chime of a clock from the Admiralty spire. You must grapple with this tension. The grand dreams of your nakaz lie on your desk, a testament to your aspirations, while the intractable problems of Russia, serfdom, corruption, a resistant nobility, are contained in the stacks of reports that threaten to engulf you. The path of an enlightened despot, you are discovering, is a lonely and often frustrating one, paved with good intentions and littered with compromises. The flickering candlelight in your vast study at the Winter Palace often illuminates not just the philosophical treatises of your Enlightenment friends, but also enormous, detailed maps spread across a long table. The scent of old parchment, ink, and perhaps the faint, lingering aroma of beeswax from polished wood fills the air as your finger, adorned with a modest ring or two, traces the borders of your immense Russian empire. The path of an enlightened despot, you've found, is indeed paved with frustrating compromises when it comes to internal reforms. But on the grand chessboard of Europe, in the realm of foreign policy, war, and expansion, your actions are often far more decisive, the results more tangible, if sometimes more brutal. The distant, mournful cry of a foghorn from a ship on the Neva, or the rhythmic tread of a sentry patrolling beneath your window, are the only sounds that break the profound quiet of your late-night strategic deliberations. While your legislative commission might have dissolved without producing its grand new law code, your armies and diplomats are busy redrawing the map of Eastern Europe, the Ottoman Empire to the south, and the decaying Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth to your west. Present both threats and irresistible opportunities. Your reign becomes an era of significant Russian expansion, driven by a potent mixture of strategic necessity, economic ambition, and perhaps a touch of that imperial wanderlust that seems to afflict all great powers. The first major test comes with the Russo-Turkish War of 1768-1774. The Ottomans, perhaps unnerved by your growing influence in Poland, declare war. Your response is swift and powerful. Your generals, like the brilliant Pyotr Rumyantsev and the eccentric but effective Alexander Suvorov, lead Russian armies to stunning victories. You follow the campaign dispatches avidly, late into the night, imagining the smell of gunpowder and the roar of cannons on distant battlefields. Your fledgling Black Sea fleet, largely the creation of your dynamic favorite Grigory Potemkin, achieves a remarkable victory at Chesma Bay. It's a significant historical fact that the Treaty of Kuchuk-Kainarka in 1774, which concluded this war, was a triumph for Russia. You gain crucial territory along the northern coast of the Black Sea, including the strategic ports of Kerch and Kinburn, access to the Black Sea for your merchant ships, and, perhaps most significantly, vague but potent rights to protect Orthodox Christians within the Ottoman Empire. This last clause would become a useful pretext for future Russian intervention in Ottoman affairs for decades to come. You can almost taste the salty air of the Black Sea, a sea that is now, finally, open to Russian ambition. This victory paves the way for the development of New Russia, Novorossiya, the vast, fertile steppes north of the Black Sea. Grigory Potemkin, your confidant, former lover, and one of your most capable statesmen, is the driving force behind this colossal undertaking. He found cities, Kherson, Nikolaev, Sevastopol, Yekaterinoslav, literally Catherine's glory. He encourages settlement, builds infrastructure, and establishes a powerful Black Sea naval base at Sevastopol. Stories of his Potemkin villages, allegedly fake, portable settlements designed to impress you on your grand tour of the Crimea in 1787, become legendary. You appreciate his boundless energy and vision, even if you might privately arch an eyebrow at some of his more flamboyant methods. My dear Grigory, you might write to him by the midnight oil. Your enthusiasm for creating utopia in the South is admirable, though pray tell, are the sheep in these new model villages also on casters for easier relocation? To your west lies Poland, or more accurately, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a vast, unwieldy kingdom plagued by internal divisions, an elective monarchy that invites foreign interference, and a powerful nobility, the Szlachta, fiercely jealous of its golden liberty but incapable of effective governance. It's a power vacuum, and nature, especially political nature, abhors a vacuum. Alongside Frederick the Great of Prussia and Maria Theresa of Austria, you participate in the first partition of Poland in 1772. Russia receives a substantial slice of territory, primarily Belarusian and Latvian lands. Negotiating the terms with Frederick and Maria Theresa is like refereeing a particularly acrimonious pie-eating contest where everyone insists they deserve the biggest slice, the cherry, and possibly your napkin too. It's a cynical move, justified by all three powers as necessary to prevent chaos, but it's a land grab, pure and simple, that further extends your western borders. The Ottomans, however, are not content to let Russia dominate the Black Sea. A second Russo-Turkish war erupts in 1787, shortly after your triumphant tour of the newly annexed Crimea with Potemkin. Once again, Russian arms, under Suvorov and Potemkin, prove superior. The capture of the supposedly impregnable fortress of Izmail by Suvorov is a particularly bloody but celebrated victory. The Treaty of Jassy in 1792 confirms Russia's annexation of the Crimean Khanate, which you had formally absorbed in 1783, and pushes your border westward along the Black Sea coast to the Dniester River. Your dream of securing Russia's southern flank and establishing it as a major Black Sea power is now a reality you even entertain, for a while. Potemkin's grandiose Greek project, a scheme to dismember the Ottoman Empire entirely, chase the Turks from Constantinople, and establish a new Byzantine-style empire with your appropriately named grandson, Constantine, on its throne. It's a wildly ambitious, perhaps even fantastical plan, and ultimately proves beyond even your considerable reach. Still, you allow yourself a small smile. Even an empress can dream of such monumental geopolitical rearrangements. It would certainly have made for some stunning imperial portraits. The final acts of Poland's tragedy play out in 1793 and 1795. Spurred by a patriotic reform movement and the Constitution of May 3, 1791, Poland attempts to strengthen itself. This is unacceptable to its powerful neighbors. The second and third partitions follow, and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth is wiped off the map of Europe entirely. Russia gains vast territories, including much of modern-day Lithuania, Belarus, and Ukraine. Historians continue to evaluate the driving forces behind your relentless expansionism. Was it primarily a quest for strategic security, a desire for economic resources and warm water ports, the pursuit of imperial prestige, or did it stem from a genuine, if paternalistic, belief in Russia's destiny to absorb and civilize neighboring peoples? The answer is likely a complex tapestry woven from all these threads. Your empire is now colossally larger, stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea and deep into the heart of Central Europe. But this expansion comes at a cost, not just in Russian lives and treasure, but in the subjugation of other peoples and the enduring resentments that will simmer for generations. As you study your maps late into the St. Petersburg night, the city slumbering around you, The weight of these decisions, these wars, these new subjects, settles upon you. The lamplight reflects in your eyes, a gleam of triumph perhaps, but also, in the quiet solitude of your imperial study, a flicker of something more reflective. The philosophy books still line your shelves, but the realities of empire building have their own stark, undeniable logic. The lamplight in your study often reflects not just on maps detailing new frontiers of your ever-expanding empire, but also in quieter moments, on the miniature portraits you keep in a velvet-lined drawer, or on letters penned in familiar hands, filled with words of affection, advice, or news from distant provinces. The vastness of Russia, the immense responsibilities of autocracy, can be profoundly isolating. While you project an image of serene command to the world, the woman beneath the imperial crown still craves companionship, trust, and intellectual intimacy. The distant muffled sounds of St. Petersburg settling for the night, perhaps the gentle lapping of the Neva against its granite embankments, or the far-off chime of a church bell, often serve as a backdrop to these more personal reflections. And in this deeply personal sphere, the figures of your favorites loom large. This system of favoritism, a succession of men who shared your bed, your confidence, and often significant political power, becomes a defining characteristic of your reign. It's a subject of gossip, of envy, of condemnation by your detractors. But for you, it's a pragmatic, if unconventional way of navigating the treacherous currents of court life and governance. These are not mere dalliances. They are complex relationships that blend the personal and the political in a way few other monarchies have seen. It is a well-established historical fact that you, Catherine the Great, had a series of male favorites who were often elevated to high office, wielding substantial influence and receiving immense rewards in land, titles, and wealth. Your first significant favorite after ascending the throne was, of course, Grigory Orlov. He, along with his brothers, was instrumental in the coup that brought you to power. He was dashing, brave, passionately devoted to you, and for a time, your love for him was genuine and deep. He is the father of your illegitimate son, Alexei Bobrinsky. A secret kept carefully guarded, Orlov is your rock in those early, uncertain years. But as time goes on, his lack of political sophistication, his boorishness, and perhaps his declining intellectual engagement begin to wear thin. Your own mind is constantly expanding, devouring new ideas, while he remains, well, Orlov. Eventually, the romantic ardor cools, though you never forget his crucial service. He is generously pensioned off, laden with estates and titles, the standard golden handshake for a departing favorite. So sorry our paths must diverge, my dear Grigory. You might have thought, composing a carefully worded, kind but firm farewell note. Here, have a modest palace, a few thousand souls to call your own, and a diamond big enough to choke a small horse. We'll always have that coup, won't we? Then comes Grigory Alexandrovich Potemkin. If Orlov was a sturdy bulwark, Potemkin is a force of nature, a whirlwind of energy, intellect, and ambition that matches your own. He is brilliant, eccentric, flamboyant, deeply patriotic, and utterly devoted to you and to Russia. Their relationship is one of the great romances and political partnerships of the 18th century. He is not just a lover. He is your friend, your advisor, your co-ruler in many respects, especially concerning the development of New Russia and the campaigns against the Ottoman Empire. He understands your vision for Russia's greatness and works tirelessly to achieve it. He may have had only one good eye, but you often muse that he saw more potential for Russia, and for you, than most men blessed with perfect vision. It also, you admit to yourself with a private smile, lent him a rather dashing, almost piratical allure. Your correspondence with Potemkin, even after the most intense period of your romantic relationship fades, is voluminous, filled with state affairs, personal anxieties, intellectual debates, and surprisingly tender expressions of enduring affection. The precise nature of your bond with Grigory Potemkin, particularly the persistent, though unproven, rumors that you were secretly married in a clandestine Orthodox ceremony, continues to be a subject of intense fascination and ongoing scholarly investigation. Whether or not a formal marriage vow was ever exchanged, he remains, until his death in 1791, the most significant man in your life, a true partner. His death leaves a void that no subsequent favorite can truly fill. The news of his passing, while he was on campaign in the South, strikes you like a physical blow, a loss both personal and profoundly political. The lamplight in your study burns dim that night, the vast empire feeling suddenly even more vast and lonely. After Potemkin, other favorites follow, each marking a different phase of your life. There is the young, handsome Alexander Lanskoy, whose gentle nature and keen intellect captivate you, and whose premature death from illness plunges you into genuine, deep despair. For weeks, you shut yourself away, inconsolable, the machinery of government grinding almost to a halt. It's a reminder, even to an empress, of the fragility of human connection. Later, in your advancing years, comes Platon Zubov, young, ambitious, and eager to please, but lacking the gravitas and brilliance of Potemkin. He and his brothers acquire immense influence, much to the chagrin of older, more seasoned statesmen. Choosing a new favorite isn't quite like perusing a catalog, of course, but there's a certain unspoken checklist. Must be presentable, reasonably intelligent, fiercely loyal, and preferably not intimidated by a woman who juggles empires before breakfast. An ability to look good in uniform is, naturally, a plus. The system of favoritism, while providing you with loyal supporters and capable administrators whom you could trust implicitly in a court that never entirely loses its capacity for intrigue, is not without its critics. It breeds jealousy, fuels corruption as favorites enrich themselves and their families, and sometimes places men of limited ability in positions of power. Yet, for a female autocrat in a patriarchal world, it is also a tool. It allows you to surround yourself with men whose loyalty is personal, whose fortunes are tied directly to yours. Historians hold diverse views on the overall efficacy and impact of your system of favoritism. Was it primarily a source of political instability and moral decay, or a pragmatic, if unconventional method for a female sovereign to ensure personal loyalty and effectively delegate the immense burdens of autocratic rule? In the quiet solitude of your private apartments, late at night, when the affairs of state are momentarily set aside, you are perhaps not just Catherine the Great, Empress and autocrat, but also simply Ekaterina, a woman who has known love, passion, betrayal, and profound loneliness. The men who share your life, however briefly or intensely, are more than just political pawns or romantic interludes. They are part of the complex, contradictory, and utterly fascinating tapestry of your long and extraordinary reign. The soft glow from a candelabrum might illuminate a cherished memento, a token of affection from a bygone year, a reminder of the human heart that beats beneath the imperial ermine. The soft glow from the candelabrum in your private apartments has on many nights illuminated cherished mementos and the faces of trusted confidants, a small circle of warmth against the immense solitude of your imperial station. You've navigated wars, expanded your empire, and managed a complex web of personal and political relationships. There's a sense, perhaps, of having mastered the intricate dance of power. But Russia, vast and enigmatic, always has another surprise, another challenge lurking just beyond the horizon, ready to test your mettle. And it arrives not as a foreign invasion, but as a terrifying conflagration from within, an eruption of peasant fury that shakes your empire to its very foundations. The distant, rhythmic clang of a smithy's hammer from somewhere in the sleeping city, a sound usually so mundane, might suddenly seem to echo the clang of peasant weapons as news of the rebellion begins to trickle, then flood into St. Petersburg. It begins in 1773 far away on the eastern frontiers, along the Yaik River later renamed the Ural by you, in an attempt to erase the memory of the revolt. A Don Cossack named Yemelyan Pugachev, a deserter with a history of insubordination, suddenly proclaims himself to be none other than your late husband, Tsar Peter III, miraculously saved from his assassins. Apparently, Peter possesses more lives than a particularly tenacious alley cat, and his latest incarnation is decidedly less interested in Prussian drills and more focused on wholesale slaughter. Impersonating my deceased, and frankly rather trying, husband, you might exclaim, reading the initial dispatches by the flickering candlelight in your study. That's a remarkably audacious career choice, even by the somewhat theatrical standards of Russian impostors. But this is no mere charlatan spinning tall tales for gullible villagers. Pugachev taps into a deep well of grievances. He promises freedom from serfdom, an end to taxes and military conscription, and the extermination of the hated nobility and corrupt officials. His message resonates powerfully with downtrodden Cossacks chafing under increasing state control, with exploited factory workers in the Ural mines, with various ethnic minorities like the Bashkirs and Kalmyks who resent Russian encroachment, and, most terrifyingly, with millions of serfs yearning for liberation. It is an undeniable historical fact that Pugachev's rebellion rapidly escalated into a massive peasant war, the largest in Russian history, engulfing a vast territory from the Urals to the Volga River. He forms his own court issues imperial manifestos, and his forces, a motley but increasingly effective army, begin capturing fortresses and towns, massacring nobles and government officials with horrifying brutality. The initial government response is slow and inept. Your generals underestimate the scale of the uprising, and their forces are often poorly equipped or demoralized. For a time, it seems Pugachev is unstoppable. Panic ripples through the provinces. Landowners flee their estates, terrified of the advancing peasant hordes. The reports reaching you in St. Petersburg are filled with accounts of unspeakable violence, of estates burned, of families murdered. It's a far cry from the reasoned debates of your legislative commission or the witty philosophical exchanges with Voltaire. The enlightened veneer of your Russia is being ripped away to reveal a raw, savage underbelly. The courtly intrigues and diplomatic chess games you've mastered seem like child's play compared to this elemental fury. You can almost smell the smoke from burning manors, hear the distant, terrifying roar of the rebel armies carried on the wind with each new, grim dispatch. Your alarm grows with every passing week. This is not just a local disturbance. It's a direct challenge to your authority, to the entire social order upon which your empire rests. If Pugachev succeeds, or even if his rebellion continues to spread, the consequences are unthinkable. You appoint General Alexander Bibikov to lead the fight, a capable and ruthless commander. The war against the rebels becomes a brutal, no-holds-barred struggle. The winter of 1773 to 1774 is a particularly dark time, with the fate of major cities like Kazan and Orenburg hanging in the balance. The news from the front lines is often contradictory, a confusing mix of minor victories and major setbacks. Sleep becomes a luxury as you pore over maps and reports late into the night, strategizing with your advisors, the weight of the crisis pressing down on you. Bibikov, and after his death, other generals like Peter Pannon and the formidable Alexander Suvorov, recalled from the Turkish front, gradually turn the tide. The regular Russian army, with its superior discipline and firepower, begins to systematically crush the rebel forces. The suppression is as brutal as the uprising itself. Villages suspected of supporting Pugachev are burned, rebels executed en masse. It's a grim, bloody business, a necessary, you tell yourself, surgery to save the life of the empire. Dealing with Pugachev and his hordes isn't a matter for philosophical debate. It requires a very firm, iron hand. You instruct your commanders to act decisively, and they do. The objective is clear: restore order at any cost. Finally, in late 1774, Pugachev, betrayed by his own Cossack followers, is captured. He's transported to Moscow in an iron cage, a spectacle for the populace, a warning to any who might contemplate similar defiance. His trial is swift. His execution in January 1775 on Bolotnaya Square in Moscow. Public and gruesome, though you order the sentence to be commuted from the full horror of drawing and quartering to a relatively quick beheading. It's a calculated act of clemency designed to signal the end of the terror, but also an unmistakable demonstration of state power. Scholarly interpretations differ on whether Pugachev's rebellion was primarily a spontaneous, almost anarchic explosion of pent-up peasant rage, or if it possessed a more coherent, albeit radical, social and political agenda. Some see it as a desperate cry for a mythical, true czar who would deliver justice, while others detect elements of a more organized challenge to the existing feudal order. Whatever its ideological underpinnings, its impact on you and your policies is profound. The Pugachev Rebellion is a brutal awakening. It shatters any lingering illusions you might have had about the stability of your empire or the contentment of your peasant subjects. The fear it instills in the nobility and in you is palpable and long-lasting. It effectively puts an end to any further serious consideration of fundamental social reform, particularly regarding serfdom. While you had previously expressed some reservations about the institution, the ferocity of the peasant uprising convinces you that any attempt to tamper with serfdom could unleash forces that might consume Russia entirely. Autocracy, strict social hierarchy, and the firm control of the nobility over the peasantry now seem more than ever to be the only bulwarks against chaos. Your reign, which had begun with the enlightened rhetoric of the nakaz, takes a more conservative, even reactionary, turn in its social policies. The distant dream of a Russia governed by reason and natural law recedes, replaced by the grim necessity of maintaining order through strength. The lamplight in your study now illuminates not just philosophical ideals, but the harsh lessons learned from a rebellion that brought your empire to the brink. The lamplight in your study at the Winter Palace now casts its familiar, steady glow, not just on urgent dispatches and philosophical treatises, but increasingly, perhaps, on the pages of your own memoirs, or on the faces of grandchildren who will inherit the empire you've so dramatically reshaped. The Pugachev Rebellion, that terrifying inferno from within, has been extinguished, its ringleader brought to a gruesome end, but its memory, like the faint scent of smoke after a fire, lingers, a constant reminder of the fragile foundations upon which even the grandest empires rest. You are older now, the impetuous German princess a distant memory, replaced by a formidable empress who has weathered storms that would have broken lesser spirits. The nights in St. Petersburg, often wrapped in a chill that even the palace fires can't entirely dispel, lend themselves to reflection on the long, winding road you've traveled. Your reign, you muse, has been one of stark, almost bewildering contradictions. You've corresponded with Voltaire, Diderot, and d'Alembert, dazzling Europe with your enlightened pronouncements and your patronage of arts and letters. The Hermitage, your creation, bulges with masterpieces. You've promoted education, founded schools like the Smolny Institute for Noble Girls, and encouraged scientific exploration. St. Petersburg itself has been further beautified under your watch, adorned with neoclassical architecture that speaks of order, reason, and imperial grandeur. They are even beginning to call you Catherine the Great. It has a certain gravitas, you admit with a wry internal smile, certainly preferable to Catherine the Fairly Capable, or Catherine, she who writes surprisingly good French for a German. You'll take the Great. Yet, the same reign that saw this flourishing of high culture also witnessed the brutal suppression of Pugachev and the further entrenchment of serfdom. The lessons of that peasant war were harsh, but, in your view, undeniable. The stability of the state, the security of the nobility, who formed the bedrock of your support, required a firm hand. In 1785, you issued the Charter to the nobility, a landmark piece of legislation that confirmed and expanded the nobles' rights and privileges, including their exemption from most taxes and corporal punishment, and, crucially, their almost unlimited power over their serfs. This act, while solidifying your support among the landowning class, also deepened the chasm between the privileged few and the unfree millions. The dream of abolishing serfdom, or even significantly ameliorating it, a dream that flickered briefly in your early nakaz, receded into the realm of impossible ideals. The Russian peasant, you concluded, was not yet ready for liberty. Order had to come first. Your administrative reforms, particularly the statute for the administration of the provinces in 1775, were a direct response to the weaknesses revealed by Pugachev's uprising. You sought to strengthen local governance, create a more rational administrative structure, and bring the imperial will more effectively to the far-flung corners of your realm. It was an attempt to impose order, to rationalize, to centralize all hallmarks of an enlightened, or at least an efficient, autocrat. But the spirit of the Enlightenment, with its talk of natural rights and liberty, could also be a dangerous fire if allowed to spread unchecked. You learned this with the case of Alexander Radishchev. In 1790, he published his journey from St. Petersburg to Moscow, a poignant and deeply critical account of the miseries of serfdom and the abuses of officialdom. It was a powerful indictment, written in the very language of sentimentalism and humanitarianism that you yourself had often espoused. Your reaction, however, was swift and harsh, Radishchev was arrested, tried, and sentenced to death. A sentence you commuted to exile in Siberia. Mr. Radishchev. You might have sighed, reading his offending passages late one night, the lamp casting shadows that seemed to dance like Siberian wolves. Possesses a commendable literary talent, but his grasp of political timing is, shall we say, lamentable, pointing out the rather large cracks in the imperial facade, however eloquently, is not conducive to a long and happy life in the capital. Free speech, you decided, had its limits, especially when it threatened to incite discontent or tarnish the carefully crafted image of your benevolent rule. And that image was so important. You were acutely aware of your status as a foreigner and a usurper. You cultivated your reputation as a wise, enlightened sovereign with meticulous care through your correspondence with European intellectuals, your patronage of the arts, and your own voluminous writings, plays, articles, historical treatises, and those carefully constructed memoirs designed to shape posterity's view of your reign. You knew that history is often written by the victors, or at least by those with the foresight to provide their own well-argued draft. The ongoing debate among historians often centers on how to reconcile these conflicting aspects of your rule. To what extent should Catherine be hailed as a truly enlightened monarch who genuinely strove to modernize and humanize Russia, versus an arch-pragmatist who skillfully employed the rhetoric of the Enlightenment to consolidate her autocratic power and pursue traditional Russian imperial ambitions? Were your liberal ideals genuine, or merely a sophisticated form of window dressing for a fundamentally authoritarian regime? The expansion of the empire under your watch was undeniable. Russia's borders pushed south to the Black Sea, west into the heart of Poland. You secured warm water ports, vital for trade and naval power. Your armies, led by brilliant commanders, won significant victories. Russia's standing as a major European power was solidified. Yet, this came at a tremendous human cost, in wars fought, in territories annexed, in peoples subjugated. The partitions of Poland, while strategically advantageous for Russia, were a brutal dismemberment of a sovereign nation, an act that would echo through European politics for generations. As the years draw on, and the 18th century itself nears its close, the revolutionary fervor erupting in France sends a chill through all the crowned heads of Europe, including yours. The execution of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette is a horrifying spectacle, a stark warning of what can happen when the social order collapses. Your early flirtation with liberal ideas cools considerably in the face of this revolutionary terror. Autocracy, you become more convinced than ever, is Russia's only shield against such chaos. So, what will be your legacy? A German princess who became more Russian than many Russians, an enlightened despot who corresponded with philosophers while millions of her subjects remained enslaved, a brilliant politician who expanded her empire and fostered a golden age of Russian culture, yet ruled with an iron fist when challenged. You look out from your palace window at the city of St. Petersburg, your city, gleaming under the pale moonlight or shrouded in a soft nocturnal mist. It has grown, it has prospered, it has become a true European capital under your reign. It is a testament to your ambition, your will, your intellect. The distant sounds of the city, a late-night carriage, a snatch of music, the cry of a watchman, are the sounds of your Russia, a complex, contradictory, magnificent, and terrifying Russia. And you, Catherine the Great, are its complex, contradictory and undeniably formidable Empress. The lamplight in your winter palace study, or perhaps in a quieter, more intimate chamber at Tsarskoye Selo, your beloved summer residence, now seems to cast softer, more mellow hues. The passage of decades has etched itself not just onto the maps of your vastly expanded empire, but also, subtly, upon your own person. You move a little more slowly, perhaps, the endless succession of state papers, audiences, and diplomatic maneuverings having taken their inevitable toll. Yet, the keen intellect still sparks in your eyes. The indomitable will remains. The distant sounds of St. Petersburg, a city you have nurtured, shaped, and watched grow into a glittering European capital, drift in through the tall windows, perhaps a gentle night breeze rustling the leaves in the palace gardens, a soothing counterpoint to the relentless ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, each tick a reminder of time's inexorable march. The French Revolution has erupted like a volcano in the West, spewing forth ideas so radical, so destructive to the established order, that they send a profound shiver down your autocratic spine. It is a significant historical fact that you, Catherine, in your later years, reacted with horror to the events in France, the overthrow of the monarchy, the execution of Louis XV and Marie Antoinette. This upheaval across Europe leads to a noticeable cooling of your earlier enthusiasm for Enlightenment philosophers, some of whom you now view as having unwittingly paved the way for such chaos. Your internal policies become more repressive, censorship tightens, and any perceived flicker of Jacobinism within Russia is ruthlessly snuffed out. The youthful idealism that penned the nakaz has long since given way to the hardened pragmatism of a ruler determined to protect her empire from similar convulsions. You've seen firsthand, with Pugachev, what happens when the passions of the mob are unleashed. You will not allow that fire to be rekindled. Your thoughts often turn to the succession, your relationship with your son, Paul Petrovich, has always been complicated. He is a man now, with his own family, his own rigid, militaristic ideas, so reminiscent of the father he barely knew, your disastrous Peter III. You've largely excluded Paul from any meaningful participation in government, a decision born of mistrust and perhaps a fear that he lacks the temperament, the flexibility, the sheer political acumen required to govern Russia. He is, you sigh inwardly, so very Prussian in his obsessions, so quick to anger, so lacking in your own carefully cultivated charm and diplomatic finesse. Ah, Paul, you might muse, watching him from a distance at some stiff court ceremony. He tries so hard to be imposing, bless him. If only imposing didn't so often translate to irritatingly reminiscent of his father and prone to shouting at pigeons for incorrect formations. You've even toyed with the idea of bypassing him altogether, of naming your beloved grandson, Alexander, as your heir. Alexander is young, bright, educated by the liberal Swiss tutor La Harpe under your careful supervision. He seems to embody more of your own enlightened ideals. But altering the succession is a perilous undertaking, one that could plunge the empire into civil strife after your death. Whether you, Catherine, ever truly formed a concrete plan to make Alexander your successor, or if your discussions on the matter were more a manifestation of your deep-seated frustrations with Paul, remains a subject of considerable speculation and debate among historians and biographers. For now, Paul remains the Tsarevich, a brooding, resentful presence at the periphery of your power. You look back on your long reign, a reign that has spanned over 3 decades. The achievements are undeniable. The empire is larger, stronger, more secure on its borders. The Black Sea is virtually a Russian lake. Culture has flourished. Russian arts and sciences have taken their place on the European stage. Yet, the shadows are equally long. Serfdom, that great blight on the Russian soul, is more deeply entrenched than ever. The gap between the privileged nobility and the impoverished peasantry remains a chasm of potential instability. Your enlightened ideals have often foundered on the rocks of Russian reality, or been sacrificed on the altar of autocratic necessity. The mirrors in the palace, you sometimes feel, are becoming rather more critical in their reflections, or perhaps it's just the dimming evening light. Still, you've faced down foreign enemies, internal rebellions, and the endless intrigues of court. A few more lines on your face are hardly going to stage a mutiny. What will they say of you? This German princess who seized an empire and ruled it for so long. Will they remember the philosopher on the throne, the patron of arts, the legislator? Or will they focus on the ruthless pragmatist, the conqueror, the autocrat who tightened the chains of servitude? You've penned your memoirs, a careful crafting of your own narrative, an attempt to guide the judgment of posterity. Every sensible ruler understands the importance of being the first to write their own history. You might confide to a trusted lady-in-waiting during a quiet evening hour, or at least to provide a very detailed first draft for others to consult. You hope they will acknowledge the love you bore for Russia, your adopted homeland, the tireless energy you poured into its service. You hope they call you great, not just for the wars you won or the territory you gained, but for the civilization you nurtured, for the spirit of enlightenment, however imperfectly, you sought to instill. The candle in your chamber burns lower now, its flame smaller, more delicate. The sounds from the city outside seem to grow fainter, more distant, as if St. Petersburg itself is holding its breath, preparing for the end of an era, a weariness, not of the mind, but of the body, settles upon you more frequently these days. The grand adventure that began in a small German principality so long ago is drawing to its inevitable close. You, Sophie Friederike Augusta von Anhalt-Zerbst, who became Ekaterina Alexeyevna, Empress and autocrat of all the Russias, have indeed reshaped an empire. And now, as the night deepens around us, let the story gently fade. The weight of the crown, once so new, so heavy, now seems almost a part of you, yet also, perhaps, a burden you will soon lay down. The grand halls of the Winter Palace, which have seen so much history, so much drama, are quiet now, wrapped in the soft stillness of the late hour. The flickering candlelight that has illuminated your path for so long begins to dim, its golden glow softening, merging with the encroaching shadows. The distant city sounds of St. Petersburg, the city you helped build into a jewel of the north, recede into a gentle murmur, like the softest of lullabies. The worries of state, the echoes of battles won, the whispers of courtly intrigue, all begin to soften, to lose their sharp edges, drifting away like mist on the Neva at dawn. There is a profound peace in this quiet moment, a sense of completion, of a long journey nearing its tranquil end. Feel the day's tensions gently uncoiling, like a tightly wound spring slowly relaxing. Let your thoughts become lighter, drifting like a single feather on a soft breeze. The world outside these palace walls can wait. For now, there is only the quiet, the calm, the gentle embrace of the approaching stillness. Listen to the silence and let it cradle you. You are safe. You are secure. And it is time to rest. The story is told. The empire sleeps. And so too can you.